She dug in and did well to come through a first encounter against the very tricky Filipina Alex Eala, who will have to try again at some point to try and get that 10th top 10 victory.
Just days ago, Cincinnati was covered in Philippine flags. Alex Eala's name was being chanted through the Lindner Family Tennis Center. Her supporters were turning ordinary points into celebrations, and her matches had started to feel less like routine WTA contests and more like home events. Then Amanda Anisimova beat her. And suddenly, the atmosphere changed. The tournament continued. The stars remained, and the tennis went on. But one of Cincinnati's biggest attractions was gone. And that left behind a question that is bigger than one defeat. How much had Alex Eala actually changed the atmosphere of this tournament? For one unforgettable stretch, Filipino supporters followed Eala everywhere. They waved Philippine flags, wore her shirts, shouted her name, and traveled simply to watch her play. Cincinnati had become another stop in what was turning into a remarkable North American summer for the 21-year-old Filipina. She arrived as the number 17 seed, carrying a career-high number 18 ranking, a WTA title from Washington, and a growing collection of wins over elite opponents. She was also riding a 5-match winning streak against top 10 opposition, and had just advanced past Elena Gabriela Ruse after leading 6-1, 3-0 when the Romanian retired. That is why her match against Anisimova felt different. Eala was no longer the surprise player people were discovering. She had become one of the players people were coming specifically to see, and the demand surrounding her was becoming difficult to ignore. Reports suggested resale prices approaching $1,000 for some tickets, while another reported figure claimed around 80% of ticket inquiries were connected to Eala's matches. Those numbers should be treated as reported figures, rather than official proof of her total drawing power. But even the reports tell you something important. People were paying attention. And then there was Amanda Anisimova. The American came into the match as the world number 10, a former world number 3, and a 2-time Grand Slam finalist, with the power to make any opponent uncomfortable. She wasn't simply another player standing between Eala and another victory. She represented the level Eala increasingly wants to compete against every week. But the match itself began by making the Eala supporters believe. The opening set turned into a brutal battle, and the 5th game alone lasted around 20 minutes. It featured 13 deuces. Anisimova created 8 breakpoint opportunities, but Eala kept finding ways out of trouble. She refused to surrender the game, survived the pressure, and eventually moved ahead, 3-2. Every escape brought another huge reaction from the Filipino crowd. Anisimova later found the first breakthrough and moved ahead, 4-3. But Eala immediately answered. She broke back, held her serve, and then attacked again when Anisimova served for the set. The 10th game finally belonged to Eala. And when she closed out the opening set, 6-4, the stadium erupted. Philippine flags were waving. The chants grew louder. For a moment, it looked like Cincinnati was about to witness another chapter in the Eala Express. But Anisimova was still there, and the question suddenly became much bigger than the crowd, the rankings, or the hype. Could Alex Eala hold on to the lead and keep Cincinnati's biggest story alive? Then the match changed. And once it changed, Amanda Anisimova refused to give Alex Eala another way back in. The opening set had belonged to Eala because she survived the biggest pressure points and kept finding ways to turn defense into attack. The second set was different. Both players held through the opening 6 games. But then Anisimova finally found the breakthrough, breaking Eala to move ahead, 4-3. This time, there was no immediate response. Anisimova protected the advantage, kept the pressure on Eala's serve, and closed out the set, 6-2. One set earlier, Eala was controlling the biggest moments. Now Anisimova was taking those moments away from her. Her ball was coming through heavier. She was attacking earlier. And her returning was making it much harder for Eala to establish the left-hand patterns that had caused so many problems for opponents throughout her Cincinnati run. Eala was still fighting. But Anisimova was refusing to let her dictate the match on her terms. Then came the third set, and suddenly, the entire stadium believed again. Eala held her opening service game and immediately broke Anisimova. Just like that, she was up 2-0. The Filipino supporters found their voices again. The flags were moving through the stands, and for a moment, it looked like another Eala comeback story was about to unfold. She had been in this position against elite opponents before. She had built a reputation for finding another level when the match seemed to be slipping away. But this time, Anisimova answered. The turning point came in the fifth game. Eala reached 40-15 and appeared to be on the verge of consolidating her advantage. Instead, she lost 4 straight points. Anisimova broke back, leveled the momentum, and moved ahead 3-2. That was the moment the match flipped for good. The Americans suddenly looked completely settled. While Eala was forced to chase the match she had been controlling only minutes earlier. From there, Anisimova took over. She won 6 consecutive games, broke Eala 3 times during that decisive stretch, and closed out the comeback 4-6, 6-2, 6-4 after 2 hours and 28 minutes. For Eala, it was a brutal way to end Cincinnati. She had started the deciding set with a 2-0 lead. She had the crowd behind her. She had already taken the opening set. But Anisimova found the level required to turn all of that against her. The defeat also ended Eala's 5-match winning streak against top 10 opponents and denied her the chance to record a milestone 10th career victory over a player ranked inside the top 10. But calling this simply a collapse would miss the bigger picture. Eala had just pushed a former world number 3 and 2-time Grand Slam finalist through a 2-hour, 28-minute battle. She didn't walk into Cincinnati hoping to be noticed anymore. She arrived as a seeded WTA 1000 player, a recent champion, and one of the biggest stories of the North American hard-court swing. And then came the most striking part. As Eala walked off the court, the atmosphere changed almost immediately. The same supporters who had spent the match waving Philippine flags and turning every big Eala point into a celebration were suddenly dealing with silence. The flags were still there, but the energy was different. Some fans began leaving. The roar that had followed Eala throughout Cincinnati faded, and the contrast with the earlier matches was impossible to miss. Anisimova had won the tennis match, but even she recognized what Eala had created around herself. Afterward, she acknowledged how loved Alex is and how much support she has, a remarkable observation coming from the world number 10, who had just spent nearly 2.5 hours fighting her in front of that crowd. That may be the most revealing part of the entire Cincinnati story. Eala lost, but her presence had already changed the tournament. If Eala's defeat could change the atmosphere this dramatically, just how big has the Eala effect actually become? The scoreboard said Amanda Anisimova won, but once Alex Eala left the court, another story became impossible to ignore. Just days earlier, Cincinnati had been filled with Philippine flags, chants, packed sections, and supporters following Eala everywhere. After her elimination, the tournament continued. But one of its loudest stories had suddenly disappeared. That tells you how much Eala's presence has grown. Her impact is no longer measured only by wins. It's visible in ticket demand, fan travel, media attention, and the atmosphere surrounding her matches. Reports of resale prices approaching $1,000 and roughly 80% of ticket inquiries being linked to her matches show just how extraordinary the demand had become. Although those figures should be treated as reported claims, rather than official tournament totals. And even Amanda Anisimova noticed it. After spending 2 hours and 28 minutes fighting Eala, the world number 10 acknowledged how loved Alex is. And for good reason. That matters because this wasn't coming from a random fan. It came from a former world number 3 and Grand Slam finalist who had just experienced the Eala crowd from the other side of the net. The bigger transformation is even more striking. In 2024, Eala was still fighting through qualifying and trying to establish herself. In 2026, she's a WTA champion, a career-high number 18 player, a WTA 1000 seed with multiple top 10 victories, and an international audience following her from tournament to tournament. So the question has completely changed. 2 years ago it was, can Alex Eala break through? Now it's, can she consistently beat players who are already established at the top? Cincinnati didn't answer that question completely, but it gave her another lesson before the US Open, where the expectations will be much higher, and every opponent will know exactly who they're facing. Cincinnati still has tennis to play. The tournament will continue. But for 1 week, Alex Eala made the place feel like it belonged to her. And when she left, everyone could see just how much space she had been occupying. Amanda Anisimova stopped Alex Ayala's Cincinnati run. She didn't stop the Eala effect. The flags can come down, the chants can disappear. But the audience is going with Alex. Now New York is next. Can Eala turn this painful loss into the lesson that powers her biggest US Open run yet?